doing a great job of getting everybody ready health and safety wise for COVID-19. In during all the COVID-19 stuff, we were really focused on, it came to our thoughts is what's going to happen after all of this, where locals are under attack, they're facing budget cuts. What can we do to help them so we don't have a repeat of 2008, 2009, 2010 of the economic recession that we had then, where a lot of our locals are under attack. A lot of our local officers had huge fights and huge battles in their territories, municipalities. So looking to get out in front of that this time. And this is not really so much communications based as much as the last ones were. This is more of a resource for locals moving forward. And with that in mind, I wanted to introduce to you a gentleman today. His name is Greg Leroy from a nonprofit here in DC called Good Jobs First. Some of you might have already know the work, but they uncover a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for? They'll find the money. A lot of times you say, oh, they know where the bodies are buried. Well, in terms of money, where your cities and states are giving away money, Greg and his team over here in DC do a very good job of uncovering that, publishing white papers, and doing a good job of being able to say, hey, you could pay for firefighters if you weren't giving this money away. So that's really where we're going on this. So I'm going to let Greg take it away. We'll open up for questions and answers at the end. If you want to stay on, I'll be more than happy to stay until everybody's question gets answered. So on that note, I'm going to unmute Greg, and I am going to let him take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks very much. And great to be with you. How many, it looks like there's about 50 of us here. How many people have ever come to one of my sessions at ALTS? Anybody here? I'm just looking, I see one hand on one screen. I see a couple more. Great, so a few of you. So as Mark explained, I'm the founder and director of a nonprofit think tank called Good Jobs First. We're an unabashedly pro-labor, pro-public services think tank focused on what some people would call corporate welfare or business incentives or economic development subsidies, or, there's different lingo floating around out there. I'm going to share my screen in a minute now and show you what we're talking about, and then double check to see which things people would like to, which examples we would focus on. So it's being hard to, here we go. So our website is goodjobsfirst.org, and that's very easy to find, and there's a whole lot on it. I'm just going to walk you through 3 parts of it right now to show you the kind of examples of resources you can get. But to start sort of the vocabulary lesson here, if you look at the wrench on our front page, the Subsidy Research Toolkit, and then the Subsidy Research Guide, here's a list of the basic kinds of programs that we look at a lot, state and local programs especially, like TIF districts and property tax breaks and enterprise zones. So just a quick show of hands again, how many people have ever tangled with or questioned or weighed in on those kinds of issues at their local level? How many people have done that? I see one hand on one screen, just one hand. Okay, great. Well, that means there's a lot to get started here. So let me explain the sort of theory behind what we do here. So states and cities spend a lot of money, and counties and school districts spend a ton of money on these economic development programs. It's estimated at more than $70 billion a year. That spending is probably very unevenly distributed. It certainly affects some places a lot more than others because some states have really bad rules and really loose ways of targeting the money in ways that's really sloppy. We know from lots of studies over many years that a lot of this money is wasted, and really the programs are too loose and they're not sufficiently monitored, they're not audited, they're not capped, they're not sunsetted the way they ought to be. And therefore, there's a lot of room for improvement here. And we can teach you how to find where the money is and make the arguments, as have some firefighters locals already, like those in Memphis and Dallas especially, where you can put the local people on the defensive and raise the question of why are you wasting all this money on these corporate giveaways when you've got firehouses closing and layoffs happening and schools, classroom sizes too big and other public safety and public service deficits that need to be addressed. So that's sort of our theory here. I also know that a lot of you obviously work in red states or purple states. This is not a partisan issue. At its core, this is a good government, clean government, transparent accountability issue. And if you frame it correctly, you know, to argue the opposite side of your arguments would be to say, no, we think we should just throw a bunch of money out the window and hope that everything works out and not keep track of it and not get any money back if the deals fail and just give away the bank to corporate America. No elected official can really take that position if you frame your position correctly. So that's where we're coming from here. They also say that these are very long-lasting subsidies. Many of them last 10, 20, even 30 or more years. So you're talking about real corrosive hits to your property tax base. Property tax is still the biggest single source of revenue for local governments. And then obviously the biggest total source of revenue from local governments is from other forms of government, mostly state governments. And obviously states now, because of the big hit coming on state revenues, state sales tax and income tax revenues especially, they're going to be cutting back on their local aid formulas. So the tension between these local giveaways and declining aid from state capitals is going to make this issue even more urgent right now and give you more bargaining power over these issues. That's our theory here. So let me show you first the way we organize. We have two different sub-trackers that detail a great amount of data that you can go to. One is called Subsidy Tracker, and you just click on it from the top left bar of the front page of our website. Get the Dick Tracy logo here. We've had this up for a decade now, and this captures gobs of, as you can see, about 670,000 deals. We have some from every single state. We have some from some big cities and counties as well, and lots of federal deals as well, assigned to your individual states. We capture more than 1,000 different incentive programs from all those different levels of government. If you really want to get wonky about what data we have from your state, you could click on here, and that'll take you to a page explaining to you exactly which programs we have from your state or city from exactly which years. Suffice it to say that we've been busy collecting this data for a long time, and we've got lots of it, but the quality of disclosure and the completeness of disclosure still varies a lot by state. So we'll never have everything, but this is the only place where you can get as much as has been disclosed. So if you were to pull down here, there's two different ways you can use this database broadly. One is by company.
Hey, Craig.
Yep.
Do you want to share the screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not share my screen? Yikes. I apologize. I apologize. Here we go. I'm so sorry. Have I not, was this not shared before? I apologize. I thought I'd taken the choice before. So anyway, here's Subsidy Tracker, our database, which you click on from the left end of the green bar on the front of our page. And again, if you want to see what data we have from your state, you would click on the inventory of data sources. And there's two different ways to search for the data here. You can either look by company, including parent company, you know, like even big diversified companies. We've got all the subsidiaries attached to the parent subsidiary, parent company. Or you can search by locality and by state. So for example, I was told we have people from big state councils like Pennsylvania and New York on the call today. If that's true, we can take a look and say, for example, look at Pennsylvania. So if you do nothing but choose Pennsylvania in the state search, we can pull up every deal that we have in the state of Pennsylvania. If I wanted to only look at part of the data from the state, I could choose a program right here. Each time you choose a state, this box will populate with all the programs we have from that state, and Pennsylvania has a robust disclosure system, so there's a lot of programs listed here. Or if we wanted to drill down just on Allentown or Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or whatever, we could do that. But to start with here, let's just look at what we have for the whole state. So we click here and we see that we have more than 13,500 deals worth more than $5.3 billion. And here are the top 10 parent companies. So linked to the number of awards and deals and values they have. Royal Dutch Shell has a really big ethane cracker plant in the western part of the state, and that's why we have that big number there. But in any case, you can see lots of other big companies here. Comcast, headquartered in Philadelphia, lots of other huge companies getting big deals. If you scroll down further, you'll see a list of every single deal we have in the state ranked in order of their value. And if you want to see the details in much more detail, you click on the download button here at CSV and you'll get a spreadsheet. You'll get an Excel spreadsheet with this entire list of all 1,300 lines of data, together with many more columns of data. You'll get about 20 columns of data. And to the extent we have any more information about jobs created, wages paid, capital investment committed, outcomes over time, whatever other information has been disclosed, and again, the amount of data varies a lot, we'll give it to you in those spreadsheets. So you can see every single thing that we have for every deal disclosed in the state of Pennsylvania. Similarly, as I said before, if you just wanted to go down here and choose Allentown, I was told we have somebody from Allentown on the call today. You could just choose that. You could just choose your Pennsylvania again, and then Allentown. And if memory serves, we don't have a lot of deals. We've got one deal worth $100,000, and I think that's some sort of chemical plant, if I'm not mistaken. But in other bigger cities and counties, Allegheny County or Philadelphia, you'll have dozens of deals typically. And I'm glad to go back during Q&A and look up other places for people or answer any questions you have about particulars. Let's just do the introduction of the databases first, and then we'll get into questions and answers. I'll do these as quickly as I can. So the second database we have, which also is very powerful for this whole argument about money, about the drain on fiscal tax-based resources for public services, is called Tax Break Tracker. This is a very new database, and the only reason it's possible is because of, frankly, we and progressive groups like the firefighters and other public employee unions and progressive tax and budget advocates won a new government accounting rule a few years ago called GASB Statement 77. GASB is the group that sets the rules by which governments have to keep their books. And the vast majority of state and local governments, cities, counties, special districts, use the generally accepted accounting principles, which are the accounting rules set forth by GASB. And when GASB issues a statement is an amendment or an update to those principles. And we won GASB Statement 77. In a nutshell, it says that in the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports, the CAFRs, right, the backward-looking spending documents that governments issue after they close out their books on a fiscal year, they now have to put a note in that CAFR naming their economic development tax break programs and also revealing how much revenue they lost to that program. This is a very big deal in the history of sort of government accountability and municipal finance. Even to this day, this is the only kind of tax break of any kind that GASB has ever issued a rule about, right? Governments spend gobs of money on lots of other kinds of tax breaks for both personal and corporate purposes, but GASB has never required governments to account for them. This is the only type of tax break that GASB has ever set a rule down. And frankly, I laud you all and AFSCME and SEIU and NEA and lots of the other progressive allies that we worked together with a few years ago on that campaign to win that. So we in organized labor really own this victory here. So the way it works, and this is a very tedious thing for us to do. This is literally us looking at 50,000 individual PDF documents to pull this data out. And we've had a staff person working on it, and she's doing stuff all the time, but it takes time. So I'm going to show you, for example, how you can look at records in the state of Illinois, because that's a state that's profoundly affected by this. And you can see that we don't have a lot of data yet for 2019, but I'm going to click on the 2 previous fiscal years, and we do have quite a bit of data for places in Illinois there because we had been working on them. So at the first part of the state pull here are 2 state programs that the state of Illinois and the state CAFR discloses. One of them is very expensive. The EDGE program is worth $188 million a year. If there's anybody from Illinois on the call, that's the program propping up the now bankrupt Sears company, for example. But then you can see we have lots of local jurisdictions. They're listed alphabetically here. And some of them, like Chicago, are very big. So if you click on the individual jurisdiction, we'll give you the data we have, for example, on Illinois, on Chicago now. And for example, you'll see that one program alone, that's tax increment financing, that's a diversion, a 23-year diversion of property taxes, cost the city each year $95 million. It's a very big chunk of the property tax base of the city of Chicago. The TIF is a very political issue in that city. It's figured into the teacher strikes. It's absolutely a pension security issue. Every public employee local in Chicago has bones to pick about TIF because it's such a corrosive budget problem there. I want to show you another kind of resource that we have on our website. And again, we'll go back and I'll be glad to answer any other detailed questions about these databases. I just want to introduce them quickly and then show you one other set of resources here. So again, going back to the main top bar of our webpage, under accountability resources, if you click on something called state profiles, you'll get an interactive map. And you can click on any map page here and see everything we've published about things in your state. So I know there's quite a few people from Texas here. Let's choose Texas. And at the top of the page, it gives you some links and explainers here about some stupid giveaways that the state has that, you know, low-hanging fruit. You could do good things for your budget by fixing these problems. We also give you links to the state transparency websites, and we also list to you some of the groups, the progressive allied groups that we work with in Austin on state policies. In this case, the group, the Center for Public Policy Priorities, has some extremely smart, experienced staff people that we've worked with for 20 years on these issues. They really know their stuff, and we would always coordinate with them when we release our studies and things like that. If you click on the More button here, you'll get a page called Texas Publications, and it's going to give you every single thing we've ever published that has any Texas content. And you can always see that in the keys after the study. If we looked at something, in this case, we were grading local governments, and the city of Austin, Texas got a favorable report card grade from us, so we included Texas in the key there. Likewise, we did a study looking at subsidies to Amazon, and Texas has a very contentious history of fighting Amazon about the collection of sales taxes before they caved into the company. And so again, we've got things like that about Amazon in Texas. Texas subsidizes cloud computing centers like Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Apple. And again, we profiled some of those deals in Texas. And so that's why that shows up on the Texas page as well. Everything you ever want to know about bad news on subsidies in Texas, all listed in one page if you're interested in going there. So the other part to go back to here, going back to Texas, is that we also name for you some of the biggest, costliest programs, and we tell you how well or how poorly they are disclosed online. So for example, this big, costly skills program is not online at all. So we've got a goose egg in our report card study. The very controversial 313 program, which is a local property tax program that the state sort of fills in local governments on, is quite transparent. It got a high grade on our transparency study, for example. So we tell you what the details are, and we also give you links to our 3 key report card studies here, grading the state on various metrics. So although on transparency, Texas ranked pretty high at 7th in terms of what the state requires in exchange for those subsidies in terms of plenty of jobs and good jobs, it was very middling. And on enforcement or watching the store and getting money back, clawbacks, money back guarantees, it also ranked, not that well. Finally, I just want to show you some publications that we've done recently that are of a special interest to those of you that I know are in the fights about protecting pensions. So we have done a bunch of studies for the Public Pension Coalition that look at the comparison between state revenues that are lost to corporate welfare versus how much the states owe if they are keeping up to speed on their normal pension obligations to keep their state-funded retirement pension plans correctly funded. And in most cases, as you notice, if you click on some of these studies, you'll see that the difference is quite vast. So for example, in this study, if you compare, I'm trying to get to Connecticut here, for example, I think, you'll see that the state loses over $500 million a year in corporate giveaways, and the ratio between that and the pension obligations, I apologize here, I didn't have this queued up quickly, is less. It's only $449 million. So even if the state were to take a big chunk of their corporate giveaways and plug those loopholes, they could go a long ways towards solving their underfunded pension obligations. In some of the states we look at, the ratio is even bigger. That is, in some cases, the corporate giveaway numbers are 2 or 3 or 4 times the normal pension obligations. So again, at an aggregate state level, this is also good ammo for pension security fights. That's my quick demo to start. Why don't we take questions right now, and then we can move things around and take more interactive questions. Mark?
All right, thank you, Greg. If you want to unshare the screen there, we
Sure.
can.
Yep. Here we go.
All right, so let's start on a state level. Any state offices in here have any questions they'd like to bring up for Greg?
Pennsylvania, New York, at least.
All right, going once, going twice. All right, let's move to the local level. Anybody on local level have any questions? How this can affect your fights at home?
Mark, Grant here.
Hey, Grant.
So I also serve as a state level officer. Governor Hogan has already started talking about if the federal government does not step in and throw money towards the state of Maryland, that essential services are probably going to be cut. How do you see the state budgets affecting down to the local budgets? How do we deal with the interaction between those two different things and utilize the resources you just provided?
Yeah, great question. So you're in Maryland, I'm also a Maryland resident. There was actually just a big revenue fight in Annapolis this past session around the so-called Kirwan Commission for Adequate School Funding. And we, together with many other people, raised all the issues I'm talking about in terms of corporate giveaways in the state of Maryland. I'm glad to send you a copy of I actually testified 3 times in Annapolis on that. And the nonprofit group that we work with that led that charge with us is called the Maryland Center for Economic Policy. The website is mdeconomy.org. And they did a great job putting our research together and packaging it too. So I think that's where the rubber's going to meet the road. I hope there's not a special session to invoke things now, but there could be. And obviously Hogan's very conscious. He's very much on the spotlight. He's the sitting chair of the National Governors Association. He's for a Republican governor, he's being very tough with the Trump administration, which is unusual. So
I
Does that
mean,
answer
so I'm
Sure.
a little bit. So I'm pretty familiar with the Kerwin fight. I think most of us that deal in local government were definitely frustrated with the way that it went, because it developed into what, a $2.2 trillion price tag if you factor in all of the implementation stuff. That, quite frankly, they passed without any way to pay for it. And I'm sure that that'll be revisited here if there is a special session. But listening to Governor Hogan talk, and the way that a number of our jurisdictions are talking about either furloughs or RIFs, things of that nature. Um, it didn't move the needle on Kerwin. They still passed it
Right.
even without funding it.
Right.
So, the question is how do we fight these fights internally? I mean, look, people that are at a 10 to 15% unemployment rate aren't really gonna care that the guys that get paid really well and have a pension, and are still showing up to work, are getting cut 5 to 10 to 15 days of work. How do we translate the information at our fingertips in these multiple forms that you provided to weaponizing them to protect ourselves?
Yeah, great question. And look, I know the local political situation is going to vary a lot, but my message is, I think that you should look up the data for your local governments and also for your state governments. And again, I'm glad to send you my testimony and refer you to Callie Schmitz, I think her last name is, at the Maryland Center. I think that it's important to make sure that you're allied with the types of community allies that many public employee unions are allied with, right? In the same way that teachers are allied with student groups and parent groups, you all, I assume, are allied with chambers and public safety coalitions and property safety groups and public health organizations and others that you've made common cause with in the past. I think it can't just be about our members, right? It's got to be about the broader public benefit of what we do and the risk that would ensue if vital public services like public safety were degraded. And if frame that in the same way for the transit workers union, says the same thing for people getting to work and mobility, and everybody, public health workers would say now about public health. So I think that pointing out that there's loopholes that can be fixed, the revenue can be better spent on public safety and public goods generally, so you're not looking narrowly self-interested or at the expense of other public services, but you're using the data to open the wedge and say, why are we, and for example, here in Montgomery County, why are we giving Marriott a second 8-figure subsidy package because they threatened in a false move to run away to Northern Virginia twice? Why are we paying them to relocate in one of the wealthiest parts of the state instead of spending that money to save public goods right now, for example?
Great, thank you.
Sure. If there's somebody from Joplin, I know you're in line to be offering Tesla a part of $1 billion package. I was told there was somebody from Winston-Salem here that had a really terrible experience with Dell years ago. Somebody from Cleveland here, you just did a big, huge package for Sherwin-Williams, more than $100 million, state and local money. There's no shortage of horror stories on the call here today. Allentown, you've had that big Cabela's nearby that was a terrible deal.
Yeah, Greg, how you doing? This is Adam Perot from Local 302 Allentown.
Hey.
Cabela's a little bit further out from us. They really have not much of an economic impact on us. We'd be more in line with the economic improvement zone that we have in NISDA that's actually revitalized Allentown. That's the biggest hit that we're taking right now. Is actually we're not drawing a whole lot of taxes from that, but the town, the revitalization that's been going on has been put to a halt. So we're losing a lot of taxes and stuff like that. So we're going to have to get creative on our approach. We're one of those locals that was, we were supposed to start negotiations here this week. So we're one of those locals that got caught up in the COVID, have to get creative type thing. Luckily, politically, we're in pretty good with our administration, so that's going to help out. We unfortunately city did hire last year during budget season. They did hire a anti-union law firm from out west. So again, it's more communication with us, backdoor communication that we're working through this. Philadelphia got a good freeze on their contract, so that was for a year. Was I think maybe some conciliatory offerings or whatnot.
Okay.
So that's good, but there is a law firm out west that is already was April 7th came out with a blog coming out saying this is a perfect time to take advantage of COVID and start hammering locals in Pennsylvania and do not accept any freezes. So fortunately, that one of the lawyer the city hired went from one law firm from Philadelphia that we've dealt with for 10 years to this law firm out west. So started out with Ballard Spar in Philadelphia and then moved out to Campbell Durant out on the western side. So that's what we're dealing with right now. So yeah, the economics is going to be a problem. They're already projecting a $3 million deficit. They started layoffs of non-essential essential workers, which would be SEIU and a couple other groups. It's just getting creative. So
Right.
Brendan's helped us out a little bit on our social media, so we were able to get some good political stuff last week as far as interviews with Congress people and stuff like that. And we're going to continue on with that. But so, yeah, I mean, it is what it is, dealing with the times. And we're trying not to strike, and we're not going to strike out first because it's not bad optics. We want to go into this looking like we're trying to take advantage of the pandemic. So backdoor conversations is what's driving us right now.
Right. And look, I know you're straddled with an adverse state legislature, good governor right now, and the tension is going to be how much can any of those, to the extent there are moderate Republicans in the state legislature, get moved on state aid to local governments, right? Because at the end of the day, the state's going to have the greatest ability to raise new revenue and spread it around.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We work at, I don't know, JT from the Pennsylvania Professional Firefighters is on too. I don't know if you want to touch on that, JT. But yeah, we've been working well. Right now, the state legislature is only moving bills that are already in agreement on both sides. They're just low-hanging fruit stuff. They are addressing some COVID issues as far as like heart and lung bills and workman's comp. As far as state aid, that's something we're pushing on a local level when we have our conversations with our state reps and senators and stuff like that. We had a meeting on Thursday with Congresswoman Susan Wild on the federal level, and we brought that up to her that was one of the key things that's going to be needed going forward for the local government is to make sure that they get covered in this next round for small municipalities and whatnot. So yeah, again, that's also getting creative, and it's kind of the Senate side team tends to be a little bit more of a statesman type side, where the House is complete partisan on both. So it's tough. That's tough to navigate, but other than that, we're doing all right.
I'm seeing just a few people on a thumbnail, and I'm seeing some freighter screen. I'm told now. I'm not. Somebody's screen sharing an IAF logo. So the only other point I'd make about your situation in Allentown, look, this, I don't know any details about this revitalization downtown project. It may be a good thing, right? I don't know if Allentown is, the trouble is a lot of cities get drunk on these things and they start giving them away to everybody. They give them away to one developer and then 6 more developers say, where's mine? And then it just becomes a gimme that's not really leveraging anything that wouldn't have happened anyway. It's just an open candy store, and developers often, are big players in campaign finance and local politics too. So, it may in the long run prove to be a good thing in terms of bringing more tax base back to the city, unless it, gets loose and wild, like Chicago or so many other cities sort of get drunk and overspending. That's the tension. And in states like yours, I spent most of my adult life in Illinois, and states like Pennsylvania, Texas, Illinois, we're the states that have thousands and thousands of local governments, and the states don't stop those local governments from fighting each other, from chasing, companies back and forth and offering them even local property and sales tax breaks, car dealers, whatever, just to move very short distances between suburbs of Chicago or suburbs of Pittsburgh. And that's the crazy part of it, right? You're taking existing jobs and just moving them a short distances and giving up a lot of tax revenue in those cases. So there's a lot of work that the states can do to stop the kind of paying Peter to rob Paul stuff, especially in states like Pennsylvania with 5,900 local taxing bodies, or Illinois with 6,200, or Texas with, or 6,900, in Texas with 6,200. It's a big structural issue, frankly, for tax revenue. I've actually got an opinion piece coming out in Bloomberg Tax explaining all that. It'll be out shortly.
All
Who's
right,
got another question?
any additional questions out there? If not, I have one for you.
Sure.
What are some of the large companies that, if they're coming to your town, you should be on the lookout for? Companies that go through every state, every locality, every municipality.
Sure. So at the top of that list right now would be warehouse deals for e-commerce companies. Obviously, Amazon is the biggest one there, but it's Target and Walmart and Wayfair and everybody else. We think that's just crazy because e-commerce was already growing by leaps and bounds before COVID. And now they're getting, Amazon's hiring 100,000 more people to handle the surge in business. They were already eating the lunch of mainstream bricks and mortar merchants and causing a lot of retail bankruptcies. And why should taxpayers pay for that? Another one is data centers. These are the cloud computing, so-called server farms, it's where all the cloud computing happens around the country. They get huge breaks, especially on utility taxes, which affect both local and state governments. They get exempted on their electricity bill taxes or utility taxes. These things create, dozens of permanent jobs. They're extremely capital intensive because just big rooms full of computers and a very specialized fire response need, right? Because it's a big electrical fire if there's anything that happens to them. But the economic development benefits are almost nothing because there's just so few permanent jobs that they create. And then, low road employers generally, call centers, retail chain headquarters, these kind of low impact, low end social, service sector companies often are very aggressive about seeking out subsidies and moving around a lot, even though they don't really create much in terms of good jobs or good ripple effects. Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll be explaining in my piece that I've got coming out on Bloomberg Tax is that a number of other state giveaway programs that are common in some states that we think they should repeal at this point because we know they don't work. We know they're extremely expensive. A little too wonky to get into right now, but when you read these quick paragraphs, you'll understand why we think they should go the way of the dinosaur.
Thank you. Local 3606, you have a question?
Yes, sir. Greg, thank you for being on. My name is Josh Frederick. I'm from Local 3606 in Louisville, Texas. Real quick side note, I used to work in Montgomery County as a fireman. I don't know where you live, but the whole Marriott thing was one of the reasons I left. Anyway, here in Louisville, we've already seen a call for every department to decrease their budget by 10%. So the fire department has to decrease their budget by $2 million. So far, they've stated that they're going to not fill an assistant chief's position. And instead of hiring 8 guys, because we're down 8 people to be at full staffing, they're only going to hire 4. In the long run is better than losing positions, and we're not in a threat of that. But I looked real quick on your website and went through the different searches, and there's not much on Lewis, so I don't understand all that, why it's not on there, whatnot. It's probably because they don't report, or we can't get the info. But utilizing your site to help try to find ways to offset, maybe to offset those costs to be able to hire more guys, so we're not incurring overtime costs. We're not putting the stress on the guys and all those types of things. Whether there's information on the site or not, how can we utilize your resource to better help fight that fight?
Yeah, great question. So we could help you look up, if you go back to that original toolkit thing I clicked on.
Okay.
If you go on our front page, if you scroll down on the right side, there's a wrench symbol. If you click through on that to the research manual, you'll see a guide on how to research local deals. And we could certainly talk to you about local research in Louisville. The reason we don't have local government data from Louisville is because it's we're working our way down from like the 100 biggest cities, and it's not making that cut. That's the only reason. It doesn't, but we could help you also find the CAFR to see if they're reporting on their GASB 77 tax. That's the first place I would look, because chances are they should be reporting big losses on the 313 program. That's going to be the big ticket item in the state of Texas typically. If you've got any big industrial facilities there, there's going to be a big property tax hit. If you've got a refinery or something, I don't know what Louisville looks like, but
we have industry, like we have a multi-gazillion dollar Mary Kay cosmetics manufacturing plant. We have some other things there, but as far as like refinery plants and everything, I think the two biggest things we have is the garbage dump and the Mary Kay cosmetic facility.
well, I would look hard at Mary Kay
Fair enough.
and
Thank you.
start with your CAFR, and then we'll show you that local research guide. And also, we have some very active academics in Texas, as well as that group I mentioned, the Center on Public Policy Priorities, that's so smart. No shortage of friends and savvy allies on this issue in your state.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You bet. Glad to link you up.
So Greg, I got a question in the chat room
Sure.
regarding the tax break tracker. If your locality is on the non-reporters list, what is the best course of action to get them to report this information?
Yeah, great question. So we're actually in a fight right now with GASB about that issue. That is, if you don't put a note in your CAFR, and we've been on the phone at length twice with senior staff people at GASB, if there's no note, they say that means there's no reportable abatements. They take at face value that the government is obeying the rules and doesn't have an abatement program that meets the definition and is costing the city any money. Or it could mean two other things. It could mean that they do have an abatement program, but they're not losing enough money to deem it material. And the trouble is GASB does not define material, so the city gets to make up their own definition, and we think that's crazy. Or it could mean that they're thumbing their nose at the rule and failing to comply. And we're very interested in surface, and we've already found some places by cross-hatching data from school districts and cities and counties where one body of government says we're losing money, like the school district says we're losing money because the city gave away abatements, and we, the school, lost X dollars. But then if you look at the city CAFR, they don't have a note. And we're saying, wait, that can't be true, because the city has the legal power to give away the deal, even though the school loses money passively, but therefore the city must report as well. So we would love to find places where we can tell from outside sources that a city lost money and didn't put a note in their CAFR. We would love to pick a fight with you on that right now. Send Mark the identity of that place, and we will look up the CAFR with you and try to figure out, or you've already looked at the CAFR. Then the question is, does the city brag about having an abatement program on its books, or is it in a state like Texas where almost everybody gives away 313s like candy, or fill in the blank? We can skin that cat and try to figure out if they're thumbing their nose at the rule. And if they are thumbing their nose at the rule, that would be very useful politically for us right now, because we're in a fight with GASB about compliance. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you. A follow-up question to that as well is, are you aware of a good resource for better understanding TIFs?
Well, there is, back at that website, I'm going to share my screen again. If you go back to our front page, let's see here. Of course, I'm having trouble. If you go back to our front page and go to the apologize here, to the research toolkit with the wrench there, and then look at the research guide. First of all, you get an explainer here about tax increment financing. So here's your basic explainer about how it works, okay? So that you can learn the lingo and the concepts behind it. And then if I will make a little package for you for Mark to send to anybody who asks. We've published more critical of TIF than any other organization in the country, actually. The TIF industrial complex hates us for that reason. But we've published several studies showing that these things are hurting municipal finance, that they're causing suburban sprawl and undermining the tax base of existing cities, that they're crazy giveaways, no shortage of things to show you. And we'll also send you links to a couple of other group studies that have just done good survey work on how many there are. For example, we have several states with more than 1,000 TIF districts in them, Illinois included, Missouri, Ohio has a lot. Iowa has more than 3,000 in the state of Iowa. These are awful leeches in the tax-based system.
Okay, we are going to Lucas.
Yeah, Mark, this question is more probably for you or the IFF office. This is a lot of good information that we could extrapolate and try to come up with some sort of arguments. But I had the thought, I guess, of is there any way for the IFF to incorporate this into the municipal financial analyses that we get?
We can bring that up with our technical assistants. They are on. I don't want to put them on the spot. I mean, but yeah, I mean, this is stuff we do. Our MFAs are pretty stout as they are, and I believe we do lots of work with Greg and his outfit to go on top of that. A lot of this is going to be like we did in Memphis, is where we're doing the MFA. We're looking for those extra tidbits as well to really get out there and hammer like we did in Memphis. We had some bad deals for Electrolux and Federal Express, and that was in addition to the MFA that was done. So a lot of this, our MFAs are very thorough. Our team does a great job, and this is sort of like icing on the cake for all that.
Yeah, I can't speak for Nicole Taylor there either, but we have worked with them, and they're fully aware of the GASB 77 notes, and I know look for them when they examine the CAFRs, and they also have been trained on our databases. But we're always enhancing.
I can answer that. I'm the director of the Labor Issues Department.
Sorry, Nicole, I didn't see you there.
That's okay. So my department does the MFAs, and if there is information on tax abatements in the CAFR, we do include it already. If there's not, someone had a question earlier, but you know that they are giving away money, let us know, and we can dig deeper or look to other sources.
Amen. Love to have a fight over that.
All right, thank you. Any questions? We're pushing an hour, so I'm very cautious of people's time. If there's any questions, we'll be glad to answer them. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Greg his chance to close us out, and any last words that he has, and then I will thank Greg once again for joining us, and then everybody is free to go, and I will stay on as long as everybody's got questions.
I just want to emphasize, I'm so appreciative that you all are interested in this. I really love training at ALTS. You all, it's such a sharp pencil union. Many of you are thoughtful. I know many of you are already engaged on tax-based issues and tax millage ballot initiatives and so on. You're a rock and roll union. Looking forward to working with you on more of this. And I want to emphasize again, for those of you working in red and purple places, this is not a partisan issue. This is a good government, common sense, point blank, anti-corruption, clean government issue at its core. And we'll help you frame it to make sure you're on the right side of and can bring conservative partners often to you in these debates at the end of the day.
All right. On that note, I'm going to say thank you to everybody for taking time out of your day to join us. Hope you enjoyed the class. Send me your reviews, what you thought. I am recording this, so this is going to be I'm gonna just cut it down just a little, and then I'll have it ready for everybody sometime today. In the meantime, stay safe out there, and thank you very much for joining us.